Also, I want to do a land acknowledgement for the land we're on now. It stands on the indigenous territory known as the Lenahaking. And these are the folks who, during the 1680s, negotiated with William Penn to facilitate the founding of Philadelphia. So we just want to acknowledge that. So our itinerary today, we're going to go through some terminology. We're going to talk about the difference between sex and gender neutral pronouns, the concept of the binary, and then I'm going to try really hard to hold some time at the end for questions. So starting out with terminology, I'm just going to acknowledge that a lot of new words floating around, and I know that it can be overwhelming and scary and frustrating, whatever you're feeling, just acknowledge that everyone is feeling that, and change is hard, right? Like just across the board, change is hard for everyone. So really, the idea is just to try, just make an effort. Transgender is an umbrella term for many, many different gender identities. It might be gender nonconforming, it might be gender queer, it might be gender fluid. Basically means you don't identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. So there's some sort of movement there, trans being a prefix for across, meaning staying still with the way that you were born doesn't work for you, right? It's uncomfortable. There's something out there for you that requires a little movement or crossing over. Typically, I think people tend to think of only one type of only one type of identity to be transgender, meaning that, like, for example, they were born male and then they transitioned to female. But there's actually just a ton of gray in there, and that's just one example of a journey of a trans person. But it's just important to note that they don't all look like that. Cisgender could be considered the opposite of transgender, cis meaning same or same side of. Staying on the same side of the gender binary that you were born with, right? You were assigned female at birth, and that works for you. You're happy presenting feminine or as a woman, or however you present on that way, that just acknowledges that your gender aligns with your sex assigned at birth. Whereas for a trans person or a gender nonconforming person, that it doesn't work like that. Maybe there's a little bit more variability in there. Gender expression is who you are in the world. It's how you present yourself. It's how you look, it's your haircut, it's your makeup, your clothes, it's how you move, it's how you dance, it's everything. It's the parts of yourself that you choose to share with the world. It's important to know that it's not always the same as gender identity, being that gender identity is inside, it's your core, it's your brain, it's your soul, it's who you know yourself to be. It's not always safe to present with the gender expression that you feel most comfortable with, or that most aligns with your gender identity, depending on, like, maybe the place in the world you are, it's not safe, right? So it's just important to not assume that you know who a person is based on how they look, because not everyone has that privilege. Gender assigned at birth, I touched on a little bit, but when you're born, a doctor says that's a vulva or that's a penis, and therefore that's a woman and that's a man, that's a female, that's a male. So that's who we are told we are from the beginning, right? Like, we don't get to choose that. And then as we grow up, when we have more choice, sometimes, like I said, there's like an incongruence there with the gender you were assigned at birth, the gender you're being told that you are, versus being transgender or gender nonconforming, where you're telling me this and that doesn't work for me, right? Like, there's something else. I'm not fully who I was assigned at birth. Sexual orientation is who you want to date. It's who you feel romantic toward. It's who you're attracted to. It's who you want to have sex with. I think this is probably one of the more commonly used terms. I think it's just important to note that it can get a little sticky with sexual orientation and gender, because while they're not the same thing, they relate to each other, right? Like if you see maybe two people that you perceive to be male, to be masculine, walking down the street, and you say, oh, there's a gay couple. Well, maybe that label doesn't actually work for them because they don't identify as a man or as male. So they're, again, just trying to not make the assumption and to label folks who you don't know, because you can never really tell what's going on the inside. Maybe they're not allowed, or they can't, or they don't even want to present how they actually feel inside. So it's just about knowing how they relate, knowing that they're not the same thing, but also not to assume. So you're probably familiar with the Lgbtqia Plus acronym. It's getting longer and longer, which is excellent. Stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. Plus meaning this isn't the end, right? Like we're finding words that fit our identities better and better. And so this acronym is expanding in a really exciting way, right? Because there are identities out there who never had a word that felt good to them, never had a label. So as our language is expanding, it's giving more space for those folks to be comfy in their identity. When I say comfy, I mean like a warm, like soft sweater that's like a little oversized. It's not tight, you can move in it, but it feels really comfy. Sometimes the like sweaters we're given at birth, they're a little too tight and they don't fit. And some people need a little bit more motion. And just to also acknowledge in the acronym that includes sexualities and gender. So to also be careful not to conflate them there. Some of the newer words or letters that you might have heard that might be more confusing might be the intersex and the asexual. Of that, we can't get completely into those for today. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time. But just to note that there are many, many other configurations of genitals that don't completely match a vulva or don't completely match a penis. And so those folks are intersex. Some of them identify as trans, some of them don't, some of them are non-binary, some people don't even know they're intersex, right? Because the internal sex organs or hormones are different, but not affecting them, if you will. So just to acknowledge intersex folks are out there, and they're basically as common as folks with red hair. So just assume also, or just to be aware also that there are more than two options, right? Even though we don't hear much about those folks, we only hear about male and female, but they exist and they matter. Asexual is another spectrum that, well, it's a spectrum, right? You can be all the way to one end and be completely uninterested in sex. Maybe you want to have a partner, maybe you want it to be platonic. Maybe you masturbate, maybe you don't. Like it looks different for everyone. Some people, asexual means like maybe I'm in the middle, and maybe not sure. Maybe it changes for everyone you're with. So just allowing space for that also, to not assume that, you know, all humans or most humans are sexual beings, as some of them are. And the plus there again, room for growth. I touched on this a little bit, the lexical gap, just meaning that our language is lagging, right? Like we have people who have feelings and identities that we don't have a word for. And that doesn't mean that these folks haven't existed forever. They have. We just haven't had the language. So the lexical gap is it's lagging, but it's moving, right? Like these newer labels for identities are coming out. And that also is a lot of opportunity for folks who don't necessarily feel right with the labels that are available to them, because you can always make up your own, invent new words, and sort of help the progression move to make everyone kind of more comfortable with their identities. Sex and gender, not the same thing. A lot of times get conflated. So sex is biological, it's anatomical, it's your genitals, your hormones, it's the physical entity, and typically defined by how your genitals look. Gender is, like we touched on before, a combination of gender identity, who we are inside, who we know, where we are centered, and how you choose to express your gender in the world. It may match your identity, it may not. It may change from day to day. But that's a little bit about how they differ. Just gonna check my time. Okay, so here's a nifty graphic that I love by TSER, which is a really great organization, Trans Student Educational Resources. I know we have a lot of teachers in the audience, so that might be a really great resource for you all. So the gender unicorn here sort of explains a lot of the things that we have touched on so far. The polka dots to the left there that sort of go from head to toe are the unicorn's gender expression, right? It's their, in this case, their tail, their hairdo, their horn, like the things that they're presenting to the world. It's what you choose to share with the world about yourself. And the thing to note here is that there are 3 lines, feminine, masculine, and other. So just the idea that, maybe in the past we've been told that you can only be one or the other. You can only be boy or girl, feminine, masculine. But here in the image, it shows that we have so many other options, and it's a spectrum. So you might feel, I'm going to use my pointer, you might feel maybe one day all the way over here to the feminine side, I'm going to wear makeup and dresses and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean that you don't also have masculine tendencies or an identity that's somewhere also on the line. You can be both. You can be both feminine and masculine. You can be whatever configuration feels good to you. And maybe that includes just being on the other line and making your own thing and how that works for you. But just really important to note that you don't have to be one thing. You can be there can be many aspects of yourself and can identify anywhere along the spectrum here. Same for gender identity, like we had spoken. This is in the unicorn's mind. This is who they know they are. So here on the right, we have again 3 lines: female, woman, girl, male, man, boy, or other genders. So there again, you can find yourself on any given day. Maybe it stays the same forever. You always feel that you have a good handle on your gender identity and you feel good about that. And then other times it moves. It can change day by day. I know that's probably a new concept, but for some people it does. And so it's just really, it's okay if you don't understand all of it now. Like I said, change is hard. And it's just the effort, right? We're just starting to open our hearts and minds to maybe think about some things that we've never really been exposed to in the past. So back here to the unicorn's gender identity, they can choose at the same time how to identify, how to put that into words for themselves to make themselves comfy in that like oversized, comfy, soft sweater that I was talking about. And of course, there's a third line, just like the gender expression, is that there's other options. There's something else that we don't have words for that you just maybe feel like something else that you don't have a word for. And then, that lexical gap will be coming through, picking up the pace. Sex assigned at birth. We also touched on a little bit before. it is your chromosomes. It is what the doctor sees when you come out, typically female or male, but also this category of other or intersex. Like I said, there are many other atypical configurations of genitals. So just like keep that in mind, while the majority are often labeled male or female. So the point here is just to note that the little DNA symbol guy is in between the unicorn's legs, whereas the gender identity is in the brain, in the heart, and the gender expression is head to toe, right? It's who you show to people. So really that being the main point, in that these things don't always, like, quote unquote match, if you will. Like a person with a vulva doesn't always feel feminine, doesn't always feel like a woman. So while they don't feel like a woman or feminine, that doesn't mean that their sex assigned at birth wasn't female, or owner of a vulva owner, if you will. Here in sexuality, we again can't get into much today, unfortunately, but they both live here in the heart. And this is just to say, like, the asexual spectrum we were talking about is that you might be more attracted to some folks and less attracted to other folks. You might be all the way on the right for all of these things. You're into anyone and everyone at any time. Or maybe you're not so sexually minded, not so physically minded, but you're romantic. Your attraction is more emotionally based, and maybe you care a little bit less about the physical nature of relationships. So here's an example. I know that might be a lot to take in, but here's a human example that might be handy, in that this is Skylar. This is a human. Up here at the top for gender identity, on the feminine line at the top, almost in the middle, and then the masculine line a little bit less toward the left, and then all the way to the right on other or neither. So Skylar identifies as gender fluid. So that one that always makes me picture water, right? It's always moving, it's always changing shape. And so that's what Skylar identifies as, at the same time as identifying as sort of halfway feminine and a little bit less than halfway masculine, maybe a quarter of the way. And so that's the combination that feels right for Skylar right now. So again, just sort of opening your hearts and minds to the possibility that there's something other, maybe, than we've only ever been taught that gender and sexuality, or black and white, only two options. But here, everyone has at least three options, and it's sort of infinite, right? We can't really have an accurate physical representation of infinity. But here, I'm super visual, and this is helpful for me as we go down to gender expression. We have the feminine, the masculine, and the other or neither. Skylar is sort of in the middle for both feminine and other, and then closer to the right side on masculine. So just representing that Skylar feels more masculine than feminine. Skylar feels more masculine than other, but feels other or neither greater than feeling feminine on this day, right? So that might look like, a person doing what's a masculine thing, like lifting weights and really like her strong kind of way, but also like, I don't know, wearing earrings or like painting your fingernails. And then whatever other, accessories feel good to you on the other or neither side. So just trying to keep in the back of your head that there are other options than maybe you see on a person. So the gender expression on Skylar being the pants, the t-shirt, and the hairdo is really all that we see so far. But so that's what this is Skylar's representation of their gender expression, meaning over here, these lines in blue, a little bit center feminine, a little bit more masculine, and a little bit center other. So that's what that looks like on Skylar, and that can look completely different on someone else. Sex assigned at birth, we touched on, it's your anatomy, it's your biology. And that doesn't necessarily match how you might want to walk around in the world. That's down here in between Skylar's legs. It might be helpful to think of sex as in between your legs and gender is in between your ears. Sometimes that's a helpful visual. And then just quickly touching on these sexual arrows here, romantically attracted to men. So really, really into going on dates with men, a little bit more toward the middle for women and other genders, but they're all at play, right? So Skylar doesn't just want to date men or just want to date women or other genders. And another term here that we can't really get through is demi-romantic, meaning that Skylar isn't really interested in having sex with a person who they don't know emotionally, or like that emotional connection needs to happen before they're interested in taking the relationship to a sexual place. And then sexually attracted to identifies as pansexual. So this can also look a number of different ways, pan meaning around or all. So you might be interested in dating everyone, every person. You might be interested in dating a whole lot of people, but maybe not that person over there, right? So it can be, it can look a lot of different ways. So here I've just added the blank coloring sheet of the gender unicorn, because I think it's really, really nice to me to see just like all this opportunity, right? It's like completely blank. You can fill it out every day if you want. And like I said, the physical representation is really helpful for me. And just really noting that you don't have to identify as queer, you don't have to identify as trans or any other gender to do an exercise like this, just in the name of self-exploration. It can be really helpful to just sort of understand maybe other folks that you might know. And also for the teachers in the room, this can be a really great exercise to do with your kids or your colleagues, to sort of try to get on the same level and also provide that like healthy education. So here I'm going to take a pause to take a poll that Katie's going to send out, just understanding that this is a lot of new information, and just sort of checking in, taking the temperature to see if you feel lost, if you're following, if it's too much. Tell me where you're at. Okay, great. We're for a large part on the hanging in side. I'm good, I'm learning. There's a lot going on, but you're doing okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So non-binary might be a new word or term for folks, and that just understanding that non-binary folks and the concept of being non-binary has existed forever. These are not new folks who are just like hip and trendy and creating a whole new thing. We've been around forever, and there just really hasn't been the language or the safety or social norms that allowed for it to express being non-binary, which just means that you're not entirely male or female. So on that spectrum that we were just looking at with Skylar and the unicorn, is that there's another combo here, right? I'm not all the way over to one side, to the male side, say, and then nothing else. There are parts of me that are all over that that sort of scale if you're sort of measuring your gender identities. So non-binary is options, right? It's it can look completely different person to person, and that's also really exciting for me, also that there's just like opportunity, whereas in the past, or at least earlier in my life, there was no other option. So it kind of left folks just feeling like wrong, like, what is this? I don't have a word. So really, really excited that the language is starting to catch up with us. The singular they, I also know, can be a stressor for specifically literature folks. However, it has really been around forever, 1300s, and the singular they was added to the dictionary in 2019. So it has evolved, right? The they pronoun has evolved from a singular you, which evolved from a plural you, meaning it started out referencing like you, a people over there, you are you, versus me, I'm Jesse, I am one person, to the they and the singular they. So just using this when you don't know how a person identifies, it can be the least harmful until you figure out what their identity or pronouns are. It is indefinite, which I think is just an excellent way of describing what it means to be non-binary, and use they, them pronouns. It's indefinite, right? In that way, it might be, harder to nail down with words. And just there again, there's possibility, a lot of possibility to maybe be like, I don't really like being called she and her, but I've never really thought about it because I didn't know there was any other option, right? When I realized, things like that, it was like the whole world opened up to all these options. So that can be a really positive thing for folks. So just taking a second to try to conjugate the singular they, and just to note that we've been doing it forever, but we're sort of less aware of it. Like that person over there, I don't know who they are, right? I don't know the gender, I don't know who they are, plural, singular they. And so now we're just doing that, but we're more aware of it, right? So that might make it a little sticky when you're trying to stumble over your words. And just acknowledging here again, change is hard. It's hard for everyone. I misgender folks all the time, meaning using the wrong pronouns for them, or sort of identifying them as the incorrect identity. And it's okay, right? You just acknowledge it and you move on. You apologize, you say the correct pronoun, and then you move on. So I know there's like social shame and like anxiety and sort of just embarrassment because you don't want to offend. You don't want to say the wrong thing, right? And have it be an issue, or just being embarrassed. So an activity that I have found helpful, maybe also for anyone's classrooms, is to sort of break up into pairs and tell each other a nursery rhyme or fairy tale, something that you know very well, and then use the main character as a they, as a non-binary, gender neutral pronoun, like they. And so that sort of helps you to be aware of when it comes up in conversation and speaking at length, and then how to sort of attune your brain to sort of get more used to that. The one that usually is the stickiest is the one there at the bottom. She is over there, he is over there, they are over there, right? So the verb is what changes, which I have found personally to be the sticky part, because it takes a little bit more awareness than it does to say they went to their bedroom. So that might be a good place to start, or to focus on if folks are feeling a little iffy about how to use this language in public. Just touching on briefly some incorrect terms that may have evolved over the years because our language is getting more sophisticated. And so transgendered is not an adjective, and one does not transgender. One is transgender and one transitions, right? So the first and the third red lines there, using transgender in the wrong tense. One is not a transgender, right? that is a transgender person, that is not a trans or a transgender. And sex change, moving along to gender affirming surgery, as it is not, it's not just that. It's affirming gender in a way that applies sex to a body in a new and more comfortable way. And so here again, just noting that change is hard and it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes in public. It's okay. Also, you're not going to get better until you try. So it's just about making the effort, right? And acknowledging that there's a change here that you can use to help folks feel more comfortable and more seen. Because it's ultimately not about you, right? It's not about you using the wrong word. It's about the person who you misgendered or sort of assigned a different gender identity or sexual identity that they don't agree with, that they don't feel like. So all I need is if you've used another pronoun other than they, them, which happens a lot, then to just acknowledge that, because if you don't go back, a lot of people feel embarrassed and they're just like, let's just power through the conversation. But that's actually the hurtful part, because then I'm erased, right? Like my identity, my personhood is not there anymore because you're referring to someone that I'm not, right? So that is the hurtful part. And because ultimately I feel like the whole goal is to be seen for who you are. Everyone just wants to be seen and accepted for who they are. So that's about decentering yourself and sort of taking yourself out of that equation more, because ultimately it's about the other person feeling seen and acknowledged. So this is sort of an old concept of the binary in terms of gender, and it's either boy or girl. It's either man or woman. There are only ever two options, just like the ones and zeros there. There are only ever ones and zeros. There's nothing else. There's only the one person in the dress and the one person in pants, nothing else. Which is sort of a cultural norm that we're definitely coming against for folks who don't understand or feel that this sort of configuration of gender works for them, right? There are more options. I'm not only over here, or maybe I'm in the middle here, or maybe I'm moving across. There are so many other options. And so when I say gender, this is what I think of. This is infinite possibilities. It's all the shades and hues and like all the options that I need to feel at home. The binary doesn't work for me because I'm not man or woman. I'm more man than I am woman, which is why I look like this, because it's the easiest way for me to be, but I don't actually identify as a man, right? So there are all these like internal factors here, and everyone just sort of has to sort it themselves, right? And there again, the process of transitioning medically or being transgender or meeting non-binary or any of these terms is that there's a process, and it might not look like one would expect. A little story to sort of implement this sort of idea, but in the name of transgender visibility, I do think it's important for folks to have a firsthand experience of someone who has had experience and can sort of articulate a journey that I think a lot of people don't experience or understand. So I'm going to attempt that here. So woman is on the down right side, across diagonally from man, right there. That's the binary. There's only one or the other. When in reality, there are all these shades in between man and woman. And then above, genderqueer, gender non-binary. So this is the area that I lean toward. I acknowledge that there's gender. I take a part of gender. I perform gender, I have a gender identity, but it is non-binary, meaning that it's something other than only man or only woman on the top left and the bottom right there. But I acknowledge gender in a way that down on the left at the bottom, someone can also be non-binary, but not acknowledge gender, being agender or genderless in a way that gender doesn't work for me. This isn't right. I'm not comfortable, right? So like I said, non-binary can be defined in just a lot of different ways. And you don't want to run over, but so this is what it looked like for me a little bit, right? Like I was told that I was this, I was told that I was all pink, and I was all pink for a while because I didn't know that there was something else that I could be, right? Never questioned it, never knew that I could, because without representation of yourself in the media, you kind of don't know what it is. You kind of feel wrong, or I felt wrong. I'll just speak for myself. Like if there's a word for me, then this can't be right. I can't be this. It's not okay. So noting here that the arrow is above the white side of like maybe completely gender neutral. I was androgynous here in the middle in the like super yellowy green. And while I feel more androgynous, I was very uncomfortable physically in the world. I felt very unsafe. And so I continue to move over here into the all green area with the two arrows because I say that I transitioned too far, right? Because the only representation I had for a man was like really, really limited in terms of just being like this. It got quite toxic for me because I was expressing gender in a way that was sort of icky and was hurtful to other folks, and it just didn't work for me. And so as I lived longer and spent more time on hormones and sort of got more comfortable in my skin, I sort of backed out of that in the completely green area, which would have looked again like someone who can never cry, who's like only tough, who only, not there being no fluid there being no opportunity. Whereas when I swooped up here into the more limey space, it gives me so much more opportunity. And honestly, I'm more feminine now than I ever was before I transitioned, right? Because I was performing this hypermasculinity because the whole woman thing was very uncomfortable and it was wrong, right? So while I'm not completely over here at the edge of the all green, I've transitioned in a way that has me presenting my gender, performing gender, as we all do. It's a social construct, meaning that society tells us that we have to be one or the other. We have to be all these attributes that are quote unquote male or female, that of course don't always fit. So now I'm more in this non-binary space where, like I said, I'm more comfortable looking like this than I am in other ways that I've looked or identified, and I'm most comfortable using they, them, as I've used other pronouns, and this one is the one that fits a little better, and my sweater feels more comfy, if you will. But it's going over here more toward the right, toward non-binary, but gender is a thing, versus if I were going toward this dark blue area, I'm feeling less and less a gendered person, right? Like I don't see it, I don't get it, it doesn't work for me. But there again, this is just one example, transitioning from female to male, right? And just to sort of acknowledge that there are other options and it can look many different ways, right? It can look different on anyone. It can always be moving. It can stay the same way. I also like this visual. Again, visual aids are helpful to me, the box of crayons approach, in terms of you can see the shades, right? You can see like the dark pink, the middle pink, and the light pink. So maybe one day you're in the same line, right? You go up and down in the same line, but you're different. It's shaded in a different way, if you will. You might be like presenting more to the extreme of, I don't know, femininity or whatever label you're feeling good about that day, and then maybe another day you're feeling less like that person, and you might be a little lighter, a little muted. But also, there are still all of these crayons in the box, right? Like nothing's keeping you from staying in the same line of dark pink, medium pink, light pink is the general idea. And I really like the thought of picking out crayons because you can always put the crayon back. It's just how it works for me. And just another image here to show the importance of just like an open mind and seeing how many options there truly are. You can, your gender can feel different based on the weather. It can feel like all infinity genders. It can feel like bits and pieces. It can feel like over there one day and back the other day. Or I'm here, I'm centered in this way. Maybe I was assigned this way, maybe I wasn't, but this is comfy for me, and that's where it's going to stay. And also, the most comfortable label for myself is non-binary. So there's so much space there. And then down to the right corner, also remembering the option that you might not even be on this page. Just quickly noting that there are some misconceptions about trans folks. There's no like one way for a trans person to express their sexuality or their sexual orientation, right? And that's the importance in asking those questions. Like if I'm assuming that's a woman, and then I use the word heterosexual, if you assume that she's with a man, right? And that she goes by she and he goes by he. So those are all those assumptions that again, we're taught in society. There's no, that's not bad. You're not bad if you have those types of narratives in your head, because that's been really, really ingrained, right? But just trying to open up your mind and maybe see that for other folks, it's not either or. Also, trans folks don't need to have the same hyper masculine approach or the same hyper feminine approach to like qualify them as being trans, right? Because there's usually that one narrative out there that it looks like you started in one completely on one side and went completely to the other side, which in my example earlier, it started like that, but that didn't feel comfy, just like it works like that for some folks and for others not. And based on that, they will have different words that feel good for their sexual orientation. So just making sure that you're using the words that feel best to them. And also the misconception that all folks who are trans want surgery or need surgery, whether that be bottom surgery or genital surgery or top surgery, chest surgery. One does not define the other, right? If you do get chest surgery, it doesn't mean that you're trans. And if you're trans, it doesn't mean that you have to get chest surgery. So there again, checking in with the humans. So that's the show. And I'd love to just check in with the Q&A box and see what to hear from you all at this point. As an elementary school nurse, what should I focus on when I see students with different gender identities? How can I make students feel safe and comfortable in my health room? Excellent question. And I think folks with offices or like work environments where the youth are coming in, or just trans and gender queer folks at all, I think that like silent messaging can be really helpful in terms of like putting up the sticker that says like safe space, rainbow, things like that sort of just let people know that they're safe, even if you as the human, as the nurse, aren't like verbally saying or trying to affirm them in that way. I think that goes a long way. And then also to ask open-ended questions about how they're feeling, how, I don't know, things are going in school in terms of like bullying, are there safe, are there restrooms that are appropriate for them to use. I think all of that would be creating a great support system for those kids. if someone's pronouns are she, they, how do you refer to that person? Excellent question. And this happens a lot, right? Somebody doesn't only need to want to use one pronoun, right? Like either she, hers, or they, them might feel good to that person. I tend to use the first one, but I always ask which feels better, which do you prefer? Because for me, there's a preference, right? So that's what makes sense. And for other folks, there's not a preference. And that's why they give both options. So I would check and see, do you prefer? Or you just use one and say, sometimes when I'm not feeling sure in a conversation of how one identifies, if I can't hear other people refer to them, or if I feel like it's a little too late in the conversation to like ask and it be socially acceptable, right? Because that can be awkward. I tend to go for the one that I think, or the gender neutral one, because that can be less hurtful. So here I would probably go, yeah, so she went to the store, like, and give that beat. And I always do this, to just sort of be like, this is your space, please correct me, please tell me who you are. And then you just continue with that sentence, right? So it's not a huge hullabaloo that makes everyone feel uncomfortable. So that's where I would start. Would the terms bisexual and asexual be the same? No. Historically, bisexual, bi meaning two, of course, meant cis men or cis women. For me, it's a little bit of an icky word because it sort of doesn't include me at all, right? It doesn't include gender neutral folks or non-binary or trans folks. But that being said, I do know more and more folks who use bisexual to mean other things, right? Maybe it means men, cis men and trans men. Maybe it means trans men and trans women, or any sort of these sort of structures that they have for themselves, and just being like, reminded that anyone can choose a word that feels good to them and say, this is what I am because, right? Like, this is what that word means for me. And asexual is another spectrum there in terms of like, I might be less interested in having sex with folks, a meaning without, right? So that can be completely, ever, forever, I don't want to have sex, I don't like it. That can look like maybe with one, or like with a certain person, I might be into it, I might not be into it. Or maybe I just like to do some things and not other things. Maybe I don't want to have penetrative sex, but I do want to masturbate or mutually masturbate. So there's a spectrum there, but to the very, very basis of the words, bi meaning two options and a meaning without. There is scientific literature to know more. If you're not with an accredited institution, so you can't do the research, Google Scholar is excellent. And I can also send out some resources after the event and include some links to some really excellent articles, but Google Scholar is where I would start. And thank you so much for asking. That's a really, really great point, in that it is important to keep up with the latest literature, because things are always changing if you haven't caught on to that point as of yet. I don't get the question. Oh, in an ideal world, would it be less harmful to not assign any gender at birth? Yes, God, yeah. It feels so unnecessary to me because the child doesn't know who they are yet, right? Like, it's so unfair to tell someone who they are before they know who they are, right? And so it sort of puts people in this like very narrow track to be like, okay, I was told I was this, and therefore my life looks like this. Adhering to like the social norms of like what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man. Yes, excellent. definitely let's figure that out. That would be so much better. But also, Senator Carney's work in trying to get gender removed from birth certificates is in the right direction. You know what I mean? It's like amazing legislature if we can get it through. So yes, thank you for that question. Yes, please. As a parent of a toddler, I get a lot of your son is too pretty to be a boy. Usually I take the smile and wave approach, but I would love to have a blanket response in these circumstances. How would you approach this comment? That's really hard. That's really hard. That falls into the whole conflation of gender, like the binary of gender, right? Like your boy doesn't look right. I would probably say, what does it mean to look like a boy? And also, like, if this conversation is like on a playground and you don't like need to get into these philosophical points, I love the smile and wave. Just stay above it, stay classy. Don't because right, like these are passionate things, right? And sometimes I know that I lose my words when I get a little too heated about someone I love. So I can just assume that that would be really hard for your son. I mean, I would have that conversation with your son always, often, to start that early, to just like put it out there that like, regardless of whatever comments you get, like, you are right, you are beautiful, you are who you're supposed to be. Don't let anyone else tell you who you are. I think that is my time. So I am gonna stop screen share if I can. Excellent. So thank you so much for being here. It's amazing to have such a huge audience. And thank you again to Senator Tim Carney for giving me the time and space.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was really an amazing presentation. And I hope that you have some time to look in the chat and see there's been some, over like the last half hour, there's been some really positive feedback coming in from our participants. As we mentioned at the start of this presentation, this was done by Delco Area Resource Network. We thought maybe we'd have 30 to 50 people in attendance, and we had about 350 people registered for this training, which shows that there's a need and an interest across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And also you did an amazing job. And so we're really grateful for your presentation today. I'm going to take just a minute to introduce and welcome Senator Tim Carney. Senator Tim Carney represents the 26th Senate District in Delaware and Chester counties, and he's honored to be a part of this Lunch and Learn event today on transgender sensitivity in honor of International Trans Day of Visibility. He is committed to celebrating and working on behalf of trans individuals in both the 26th Senate District and also across the state of Pennsylvania. So we're excited to have him here today, and he is excited to talk about his bills that are in support of the trans community. He lives in Swarthmore with his wife, Claudia, and his rescue dachshund, Chorizo. So Senator Carney, I'm going to pass the mic to you and let you take it away.
Thanks, Katie. And first I want to start by thanking Jesse. That was quite amazing, and something that I hope we can spread far and wide, because it's just the general level of information that you were able to give us was wonderful, and I particularly was appreciative of the way that you described uncomfortable situations and ways to sort of work our way through them. So thank you, Jesse. That's but I want to thank you all for being here today, and I'm deeply appreciative of being given the time to talk about the actions that my colleagues and I are taking to really to attempt to assist the trans and non-binary community, especially in recognition of International Transgender Day of Visibility. My colleagues, Senators Muth, Capoletti, Lindsey Williams, and I hosted a Democratic policy hearing back in June on the name change process and its impact on the trans community. The policy committee is an avenue members of our caucus use to draw attention to issues. We wanted to understand the difficulties that individuals face when accessing something so important, identifying documents that represent who they are. In that vein, let me walk you through the current process for an individual seeking to change their name. If I, Tim Carney, wanted to change my name, this is the current actions I must take. I have my fingerprints taken at a local police station. I provide copies of my birth certificate, my social security card, publish my intent to change my name in 2 local newspapers, and appear in front of a judge with a petition to change my name. The minimum estimated cost for this alone would be around $500. And if you decided to use an attorney or in that area with higher court filings, publications could be well over $1,000. The cost barrier alone is enough for individuals not to seek to change their legal names. In 2017, 35% of respondents who did not try to change their legal name reported not doing so because they couldn't afford it. That's why I filed Senate Bill 1146, which would create a competitive grant program in the Department of Community and Economic Development for organizations and local governments who assist individuals in navigating the really unnecessarily difficult process of changing their names. These grants can be used to provide greater resources for individuals changing their names, including covering legal fees related to petitions and cost of publications. While this would limit the financial constraints on an individual looking to change their name, the overall process still presents some pretty large hurdles. So, frequent transphobic discrimination by law enforcement and the legal system creates a barrier for trans individuals to get fingerprinted and to file the petition. Fear of what might happen from the publication of their names also might stop an individual going through the process. This is why, as a group, our offices have worked to create a broader and more comprehensive reform of the name change process. But changing your name is really only one part of getting documents that allow members of the trans and non-binary community to identify as who they are. Individuals face additional obstacles when they try and change the sex designation on their birth certificates. In this instance, you must either have a letter from a physician stating that the individual has gone through clinical treatment for gender transition, or a petition from the court. And while this is a step up from the original requirement of having to certify that you had gone through gender affirming surgery, it still places an additional financial hurdle, particularly on a community that is often underserved in healthcare. Following the recommendations of the American Medical Society in their 2021 policy meeting, I have introduced Senate Bill 1145 that would remove sex from birth certificates altogether. This would not prohibit the collection of vital statistics, which are used by health organizations in data collection and analysis, but would simply remove the designation from the public-facing document of a birth certificate. Taking this action would eliminate the process altogether of changing sex on birth certificates and would allow individuals to more easily get identifying documents later in life. This is not the first time we have removed an identifier that appeared both on birth certificates. Previously, certificates used to indicate race, which would then be used to prop up the system of segregation that existed throughout the country. In a similar manner, trans individuals have faced with discrimination for not having documentation that reflects what they might appear to be. In a survey of trans individuals, 25% reported being verbally harassed. 16% were denied services and benefits. and 9% were asked to leave a location or establishment. 2% were unfortunately assaulted or attacked as a result of showing an ID with a name or a gender that did not match their gender presentation. We're at a point of crisis for transgender and non-binary individuals. Every day there are new attacks on these individuals who are simply looking to participate in everyday life as who they are. In the Trevor Project's most recent 2021 survey of LGBTQ plus youth, including ages 13 to 24, more than half of transgender and non-binary individuals reported seriously contemplating suicide. That statistic dramatically drops to 11% for individuals who are able to change their legal documents. We have the ability to save lives if we take steps to address the difficulties in obtaining documents that align with an individual's identity. And that's why my colleagues and I are introducing these bills. I want to thank again, send thanks again to the Widener University Center for Social Work Education and the Delco Area Resource Network for inviting me here, and ask that we continue to give visibility to the issues facing our trans and non-binary communities. If you'd like to help move this legislation forward, please reach out to your local Pennsylvania state legislators and ask them to support Senate Bill 1145 and 1146. If you need help finding your local legislator, follow the link pasted in the chat. Find your legislator, PA General Assembly, that I believe Katie will paste in the chat for us. Again, thank you very much for being here. It's really my honor to continue to work and to work in support of the trans and non-binary community. So thank you.
Senator Carney, thanks so much for your remarks and for sharing some information about those bills. I will pop it in the chat. I'll also send it out when we follow up with all of our registrants. We're going to provide slides from the presentation. We'll provide the recording from the presentation, and we'll also include information about both of the bills. We're really excited again today to have people from across the state participating in this webinar. We're so appreciative, Jesse, for all that you shared. You provided a wonderful learning experience for everybody and also shared some of your personal story, which I think really brought it home for a lot of people. When we want to change circumstances and we want to improve life and belonging for all of our members of our community, right? It starts with the way in which we interact with people on an individual level. It starts with the way we change our systems. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so exciting to see so many people here from school districts or from health systems. But we also have to address policy, and we have to address those opportunities to advance, legislation that really changes things at a population level. So Regina, Tyra, thanks to our planning committee for your help. And I don't know if either of you would like to make any closing remarks.
No, I will just echo what Katie has already said. And again, thank everybody for being here, especially thank Jesse and Senator Carney for making the time to share this important information so we can all increase our knowledge and ability to do right moving forward. Thank you.
And I echo both Katie and Regina's statements. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. And thank you, Katie, for putting this together. And thank you to my boss, Senator Carney, for participating in this event. And Jesse, thank you.
Jesse, any closing comments?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for your support.
Thanks everyone so much for being here. We're giving you 4 minutes back in your day. And we will be following up with some additional information following the presentation.
Thanks, everybody.